2, 3, 4.
Sometimes we need to slow it down, take a look around and breathe. 'Cause these times go by so very fast, moments never last. Just breathe, breathe in, breathe out. Quiet, be still, don't shout. Love is what it's all about. Breathe. Sometimes when you feel you've had enough, living is just too tough. Just breathe. 'Cause you'll regret when these days are past. Your friend just seen you last. Just breathe. Breathe in, breathe out. Quiet, be still, don't shout. Love is what it's all about. Just breathe. Breathe in, breathe out. Love is what it's all about. Be quiet, be still, don't shout. Just breathe. Just love. Just love. Just love.
Welcome to Just Love and another beautiful Wednesday night. Like we do every show, we're going to take a moment, take a deep breath, and look around yourself and give thanks for all the things we have to be grateful for. Tonight, I'm going to be grateful for my amazing co-host that I have tonight, which is my wonderful dog Missy, who's joining me, because tonight's show is all about animals and our relationship to them, the unconditional love they make us feel, and the energy that grows from within us from our relationship with them and being around them. You know, if you were to ask most folks whether they like animals or people more, I know an overwhelming majority of my friends would say animals. But, you know, we never really stop and think about why that is. I truly believe it's because animals embody the unconditional love in our heart of hearts, our soul of souls, that we know we are and wish to be again. So tonight we're going to focus on people that are doing tremendous works with animals, people who are doing healing works with animals, what they've discovered from just devoting their entire life to the well-being of animals, and how that has enriched and made their lives more whole and made them feel more at one and more connected with the rest of humanity, the rest of nature, the rest of the universe for that matter, and more importantly, how did that manifest within them as the unconditional love that they are. So my guests tonight are Gail Pope, who is the president and co-founder of Brighthaven, which is a healing arts center for animals in Santa Rosa, California, and Kathleen Prasad, who is an animal Reiki teacher and founder and director of the Animal Reiki Source. I've known Gail for a while now. The work that Brighthaven's doing with unwanted, elderly, sick animals and nursing them back to health and giving them just such an amazing quality of life. I don't think there's really words to describe how moved you are when you go and visit their facilities. Gail's journey really started, according to their website, two decades ago with her husband, Richard. But Gail and I were talking just before we came in the air, and it actually started maybe a little bit before that, or at least Richard had an inkling that something special that Gail was going to be doing something special, because when they met at 16, Richard told Gail, he said, I know you're going to be doing something special with your life, and I'm going to need to make a lot of money. And then Kathleen has had an interesting journey. She's going to be joining us a little bit after Gail tells us her story. I don't know how many of you know much about Reiki, but Kathleen does Reiki for animals, and that's basically energy manipulation. She'll explain it a lot more detail and a lot better than I can. I'm really excited to have her on. She is the leader in this particular practice of treating animals with Reiki. She teaches people all over the world. She's written many books, and I'm just so thrilled to have her on the show. But before we get to Kathleen, I would love to get Gail on and have her tell us how this journey began for her and what how she came to devote her life to healing and caring for unwanted animals.
Wow. Thank you, Kit. Hello, everybody. I'm just
Hi, Gail.
to be here. Thank you so much, Kit. Well, you kind of set the scene a little bit there with the 16-year-old story. Actually, I think my journey could be a book. It could be, I could talk for hours and hours about my journey, but I think it really started to change after Richard and I left England. Back in 1986, we brought our children, our teenagers, and our animals to live in California. I left behind me a professional background in the airline industry, and I'd adored that for years and years, and the thought of me ever entering the world of animal rescue in any kind of fashion, other than the cats and dogs we'd adopted ourselves as our family pets, had never ever crossed my mind. And so at the age of 40, I'm sure lots of people listening will agree with me, there kind of began a kind of eerie string of coincidences that just didn't quite add up. All these coincidental things happened, which obviously would take forever to talk about, so I'll run on to just say basically that had anybody actually shown me a book and leafed through the pages of what my life would look like 25 years later, I would have run screaming. There's absolutely no way I would have believed it. And in fact, it actually became a family joke that I had to decide what I would want to be when I grew up. That all changed one morning at 6:30 on a Monday morning, and I was driving to work on the 405 freeway in Southern California with our daughter Kirsty. And I just suddenly, just one of those moments, and I just said, oh my God, I know what I want to do with the rest of my life. I want to turn our house into an animal sanctuary. And Kirsty and I chatted for ages and ages, got way late for work, finally got back to the office, and I picked up the phone and called Richard and told him what I believed, and he said, wow, well, we better start house hunting right away. And so we did, and that's kind of where the journey really got going. So, wow, the early days. What was
the very first animal that you brought in, and what did it need, and how did you find it? How did that process begin of seeking out animals, or did they seek you out?
Well, actually, one of the coincidences is just before I had the revelation. At the time, it didn't seem appropriate, but the first two animals that we brought in really, really were instrumental in changing it all. The first one, actually, my son had a girlfriend who coincidentally worked for a veterinarian, and Denise one day came home and she said, "Oh my goodness, we have a 25-year-old cat at work. She's blind and she's deaf, and oh my God, she's so adorable. And the vet I work for doesn't really want to euthanize. He doesn't really believe in euthanasia, and she's eating and drinking, and I guess, wow, it's just amazing. She's in a cage, and oh my God, she's so sweet." And I said, "Well, we could look after her. Why could we have her? We'll look after her." And so Gloria joined us, and a week later, a friend of hers, John, who worked at another vet hospital, this was in Mission Viejo in Southern California, came round for a cup of tea, and he happened to mention Mitzi, who was 18 years old, and she'd spent the last 2 years in a cage because the vet at that hospital didn't feel that she should be euthanized. She wasn't particularly healthy, but she was doing okay, and she was just kind of laboring away in a cage. And so wow, that didn't seem fair either. And so Mitzi came to join us, and they just joined our already senior members of our family, and the penny didn't even drop then. So those were the first two who kind of began the journey.
And how long were they with you?
Oh, wow. Through our year of house hunting, and both of them were with us probably for another 2, 3, 5 years after we first really started the organization. It was called Cats for People too in those days, and it was very, very conventionally minded. We learned about feeding and care. The vet that actually who Denise had worked for became a really good friend, and he actually consented to give me a job. And so for 3 years I followed him around. I worked part-time while I ran the sanctuary too, and I followed him around and took notes and learned everything I could about conventional healthcare. And at those times it was, you know, I felt like I was walking on air. I was learning, I knew it all. We were rescuing animals. They just weren't actually really getting healthier. They were living, but they weren't glowing. And then through, I guess, another string of those funny little coincidences of meeting people that I didn't expect to meet, who told me things that I actually didn't want to hear. I was very, very resistant to holistic medicine in those days. And I thought I knew it all. And then I discovered I didn't, and I was kind of dragged kicking and screaming into the world of holistic medicine. And after a few miracles, like cats living into their 30s and dogs to the middle 20s and paraplegic too, we kind of realized that we were on a path to something that was very, very special and very, very different.
Could you tell people a little bit more about what holistic medicine is? Not everyone's probably all that familiar with it, so I know that's a huge part of what Brighthaven's philosophy and methodology is. So maybe you could explain a little bit to the audience what holistic medicine entails.
Well, for those who aren't familiar, I think you could almost substitute the word natural for the word holistic. The word holistic really is an umbrella that engulfs many, many different modalities of healing. Reiki, obviously, is one of them. Homeopathy, traditional Chinese medicine, you know, everything that you've ever heard of that isn't conventional medicine pretty much sits under that umbrella. Flower essences, you can just go on and on forever. Qigong, there are so many different ways to work with. And again, the word holistic doesn't mean animal. It means that it embraces all beings. Animals are beings and humans are beings, and that was one of the biggest lessons that I really learned in the early days. There's really no set dosages, particularly. I mean, occasionally there are, but for the most part, we don't dose 1 tablet, 2 tablet. It just doesn't work that way, and especially when you start to step into the world of energy, then you learn a whole different way of dosing, and especially with love, because you can never overdose that, right, Kip?
I have not found that you could, no. Love just keeps growing the more you give.
So, you know, in those first early days, we learned to feed a raw meat-based diet to the animals, to the carnivores. We were introduced to classical veterinary homeopathy, and that became our complete passion, and still is these days. And love. We accepted animals over the age of 16, and very often those with a recommendation for euthanasia from a conventional veterinarian. And we found that somehow we were developing a formula that just kind of seemed to find the right balance, and our animals were just living longer than anybody expected. But the most important thing is that they looked wonderful. Their eyes were bright and shiny, their coats were soft and silky. Everything was different, and we were learning and learning. And of course, because of the age of our animals, they died. And over the last, over the last 20-odd years, as we kind of stepped into the holistic way of treating, we have taken at least 600 animals through the living cycle, I guess the circle of life, through the living process and also the dying process. And it's just, you know, it's just kind of taught us to follow a different path and to believe in love all the way.
Yeah, love really is that healing energy. You know, if you once you start to be able to love yourself, then you move into happiness. And of course, we all know that joy and happiness are essential to good health. They're finding that out more and more, even in Western medicine. So I think a lot of the energy work all starts with that unconditional love, which it's interesting the way we started the show off. That's really what animals reflect back to us. I think that in the work that you're doing, the animals are saying, "This is how you're going to heal me. I'm showing you the way." Would you think that they sort of guided you away from the more traditional things down the path to love a little bit?
Oh, 100%. I mean, they taught us about loving. I think one of the most important things that animals teach everybody, if only we could stop to listen, is that life isn't always about doing. It's about being. Animals teach us not only about loving, but they teach us how to live in the moment. They teach us gratitude. They teach us compassion. You know, their subject matter just encompasses all aspects of life and death as well. You know, in the dying process for humans, I mean, let's face it, that 9 out of 10 of us are scared of death. We don't understand it, and we're brought up as children to fear it. Animals don't have that fear, and they embrace it. In human medicine, we're very familiar with midwives. We welcome babies into the world, but when we get to the other end of life, we embrace fear, and we don't have the midwives. Or in some cultures, yes, they did exist, and hopefully they are gradually coming back again. But animals are automatic. They have midwives. We call them Anamkara, which comes from the Celtic. If anybody's read anything from John O'Donoghue, you'll be familiar with the term Anamkara. But what we found is that when our animals are approaching the end of life, and you know, death's a process. It can be anything from days to weeks to even months, as we see the pattern of just gradually and gracefully getting older and slower. But what we find is that animals come and sit with other animals. I have 100 stories to tell you if you've got a few hours, but but you know, they come and they embrace, they sit close, they gather in groups. And you know, we had one of our earliest cats with us was somebody I lost my heart to way back when. Her name was Sarah, and when she was dying, she traveled each day to a different room in the house, and it took a whole week, and each day she would literally very slowly take herself to a different room, and she would sit. And a group of, we had over 100 cats in those days, and dogs. We had 7 dogs. And she would be joined in a circle by other animals, and they would just sit, almost as though in meditation. And I would be hovering and wondering and watching. And they would sit for anything up to an hour at a time, and then she would go back to her bed, and she'd stay there. And then the following day, she would go to a different room. And then she gradually worked her way through the whole house. And then on the next day, she laid down to die. So that was a very interesting experience, because it was almost as though she was the guru, and she was talking and teaching. However, she was, I'm sure, being supported, loved, and helped by the animals that sat around her. We've seen so many instances, and there are so many lovely stories of animals just helping other animals at the end of life. It's beautiful.
One of the most powerful stories, I think, that illustrates for me the unconditional love that animals have, not just towards their own species, but all species. There was and I wish I could remember his name, and maybe the story will ring a bell with you. There was a gentleman who spent his life just devoted to elephants in Africa. And when he passed away, all these elephants that he had cared for his entire life, they came from hundreds of miles to be at his house. It just, without, having any, obviously no cell phone for anyone to call and say, hey, John passed away. Could you come to his house? Just by feeling that connection, by being in the moment. I used to have conversations with friends of mine about who was smarter, dolphins or man. And they would, point out all of our inventions and our guns and our bombs and our cars. And I'd say, yeah, but which is more intelligent? The being that lives at one with its environment and is beneficial to its surroundings and doesn't need all of these other things, or the being that is set itself up as being apart from its environment, is completely destructive like a cancer, and has to have all of these that learns how to alter its environment rather than truly adapt to it. And they would always come back, oh, man, it's obviously that man by his inventions is smarter. And I to this day don't believe that. I believe that animals have the greater wisdom, the greater intelligence, just like a lot of indigenous peoples did, that the greatest intelligence comes from being connected to the ebb and flow of life, looking at death not as an ending, but as part of the overall process of life, of change, of and I think that's part of the problem that humanity has, is because we're so terrified of dying, we have become addicted to permanence. We want to think that we can stay still, that nothing will ever change, and that's a form of addiction that has turned into insanity in my mind. And back to what you were talking about being. Just a quick thought I had was you can do without being, but you can't be without doing. So be first, and the doing will follow. And animals are just being what they are being. It's a really important lesson to learn. It sounds very simple, but when I first heard that idea of do without or be without doing, I was like, what does that mean? And I don't understand. And the more I let myself into that, the more I realized what a great truth that was.
You know, you just reminded me of something else that just came to me, that we kind of, I think the Reiki journey has taught us this more than anything. When, you know, we're born, we grow up as children, and our brain is the most important aspect. We spend so much time in education teaching our children. However, at some level, I think we're missing it. I think we're programming the natural gift of learning that we're born with. When you work with animals, they live and they work and they breathe and they learn from their heart. Not necessarily, they do the physical things from the brain. The brain tells the body, the physical self, how to be and what to do. However, the heart is what they live from. Don't you agree?
Well, we are educational, or in Western culture at least, our educational system was set up basically modeled after the Russian educational system, was basically to create soldiers and workers. And so we teach people what to think. We don't teach them how to think. And that's something that we need to flip around. We need to teach people how to think, how to absorb all of the information that's coming into them, and how to process this, not telling them this is the way things are, this is the way things are, this is how something has to be done, because there isn't one specific way that works for everyone. And as we, find out almost on a daily basis, we don't have any absolute answers. There aren't any. That's what's wonderful, at least for me, about this journey we're on, is that it truly is infinite journey of discovery, of learning. And we need to step outside this idea that we know anything. In fact, just recently, they this past week, they discovered a city in a very well-constructed city in Africa that was 70,000 years old. And I always laugh when I see these things, because how can we think that we're going to find the answer to life, the universe, and everything when we don't even know our own history? We don't know what we've forgotten, so how can we know what we don't know?
Yeah, exactly.
If Kathleen's ready, maybe we could bring her on now, since we've mentioned Reiki a few times. I know she's probably itching to get on the show and tell her part of the story.
Hi.
Hi, Kathleen.
Hi.
Welcome to Just Love.
Thank you.
Just like with Gail, why don't we start off, and you can tell us how your journey began and how you began doing the energy work with animals you do, and then explain to us a little bit more what Reiki actually is.
Well, I discovered Reiki back in 1998, and I actually originally learned it for people and for my own self-healing. And I had a lifelong battle with anxiety since I was a child, anxiety and panic attacks. And from somebody, my mother-in-law had had a wonderful experience with Reiki and had been healed from some post-surgery complications due to some Reiki treatments. And so she told me, you have to get a Reiki treatment, and you know, you have to humor your mother-in-law, right? So I went, but I really, you know, had no interest in it. I thought it sounded weird, and I was like, whatever. But when I got that Reiki treatment, that very first Reiki treatment, you lay down on a massage table, close your eyes, and the practitioner does different hand positions on your body. And I went into such a deep space of peacefulness that I couldn't believe it. I lost track of time. I forgot where I was. I could barely get off the table. Then when I walked out to the car, I felt like I was floating. I had this inner sense of peacefulness and well-being that I couldn't remember having had, like, ever. And I knew at that moment that this was the key to healing my anxiety that had plagued me for my whole life, because I was about 29 or so when I first learned Reiki, and I had been anxious from the time I was about 3 or 4. So, and I just knew in that moment this was it. This was the answer. I didn't know what it was exactly, but I knew what it did. And my spirit just called out, Kathleen, you must learn this for your healing. And so I found a teacher, and I learned level 1 Reiki, and I started doing practice on myself every day. Reiki is basically, it's a Japanese spiritual healing system. So it's really about meditation. Okay, so there's all different ways that you learn to meditate when you learn Reiki. You learn how to meditate on precepts, which are basically, you know, do not worry, do not anger, be humble, be honest, be compassionate. So you meditate on those precepts. You learn to meditate with certain breathing techniques. You learn to in level 2 Reiki, you learn to chant. So you meditate upon these chants. You learn to meditate with hands-on healings, and you learn to meditate with another person. So you sort of hold a space of meditation and do these hand positions for a person, which helps them to go into that deeper space. So it's really a spiritual energy meditation system. And for me, I could change the word out, because Reiki, sometimes people go, Reiki, that sounds weird, it's inaccessible. Okay, let's switch out. We could say compassion. We could say love. Because all the techniques of Reiki isn't what makes it special. It's the result that makes it special. And the result is you open your heart, you access this inner space of peace and well-being, you feel so much more love and compassion for others, and you want to go out in the world and do good for others. So what really happened to me was, maybe the second or third day I started practicing Reiki after I learned it, my dog came and laid on top of my feet. And he had never done that before, because he was a shepherd, so he always sat 3 to 5 feet away at my ankle at all times, but never on top of my feet in this weird fashion. And he would do that every time I would do Reiki practice on myself. And I was like, what are you doing? This is so weird. So I thought, one day the light bulb went on, and I sat down and put my hands on him, and he rolled on his side and took a big sigh, like, ah, oh, finally, Mom. And I could see that he was experiencing that peacefulness and well-being.
He's going, the human's finally getting it.
Yeah, exactly. And what was so cool about it was he knew already what it was even before I thought to share it with him. And that was what really caught my attention, because I thought, you know what, he knows more about Reiki than I do. And so that was kind of where the journey began. And at the time I was doing dog walking at a local shelter in San Francisco, and I was walking the dogs 3 times a week and having a wonderful time. And I thought, wow, well, if my dog likes it, I bet these stressed out dogs in a shelter would like it. I wonder if they'd let me practice. So I went in and talked to my volunteer coordinator, and she's like, absolutely, it sounds great. And so I went in and I started practicing. I would walk the dog, and I would bring them back and sit down and meditate with them. I would hold a space of peacefulness with them. And to see a dog in a shelter who is at his wit's end with fear, with sadness, with maybe traumatized from past abuse, and maybe that, you know, who knows what their past is when they get in there. A lot of them have been severely traumatized physically and emotionally. To see an animal like that go in the space of 5 to 10 minutes into such a deep space of relaxation that they stop panting, that they lay down flat, that they close their eyes, and even if somebody walks by, they don't notice, that is a miracle. And so I felt so passionate because I could see not only is this helping me, and Reiki has healed me of my lifelong battle with anxiety and panic attacks. It has healed me. Not only did it heal me, but it's healing the animals that I sit with. So it's as if we learn to create this sense of peacefulness, of wellness, of love, of compassion, of harmony, balance, all those good things. And when we do these practices that you learn in a Reiki class, it's like you radiate like this shining light, all of these good things. And then the animals, because they're so sensitive, they can sense that, and they're like a magnet. They're like, oh, I need some of that. And they come forward, and they will actually put body parts into your hands that need healing. They'll come up and curl up in your lap. Dogs that are afraid of human contact will come forward and ask for contact. We have, I have so many stories from my students around the world, and in my nonprofit, the Shelter Animal Reiki Association, we have over 50 organizations all over the United States, Canada, England, Australia, South America, Eastern Europe, India. And all of these people in these shelters environments are applying these practices and seeing miracles. Because the truth is that, you know, we're all not permanent, right? We're in this coat that we're wearing for a period of time, but eventually we're going to pass away.
The only thing that's permanent is impermanence. That's
right. So we talk about healing, and often we think of, oh, well, but my knee hurts. Can you heal my knee? I have a headache. Can you heal my headache? And that's cool, and that can happen when we sit with Reiki. But the really true healing is of the spirit and the heart. And that is a healing that is bigger than our lifetime. And it's so beautiful to be a part of that and to see, you know, all these animals around the world that come from all kinds of experiences, and to see them go into that deep space of spiritual healing. And when they do, their body starts to heal. Their emotions, their mind starts to heal, their heart heals. All of them heal. So going back to the holistic side of things is that Reiki heals from the inside out, from your deepest soul and spirit out, so that we see with our eyes physical changes, emotional improvements, mental changes, and all these things. But that really isn't the coolest part of Reiki. The coolest part is that it heals us to our deepest spirit. And for me, what it's really about, what you talked about earlier, was letting go of that separateness that keeps us apart. I'm a human, you're a dog, you're a horse, you're an elephant. We're not the same. But you know what? In our soul and spirit, we are the same. And Reiki the practices of Reiki, the meditative practices, help us understand that, because it's nothing you can know with your intellect and your brain. You have to experience it in your heart. And that's why meditation is so key to this whole thing with Reiki.
You know, the sort of aha moment for me when I really started to embrace what love was is I walked into a room at some event, and all of a sudden I just felt like I was in love, you know, that feeling of falling in love with somebody. And I realized that I had fallen in love with an entire room of people. And it hit me that that's how you're supposed to experience love, that love is not a singular thing, but it's shared equally. And, you know, even now you've got physics, which is coming back with quantum mechanics to show that particles are connected by something across vast differences, and they respond to each other. So I think even science is starting to try to intellectualize what we're, you know, talking about innately. But then when it comes to any physical form, I've started to really, like Gail and I were talking briefly before we got in the air, just we all say we're a spiritual being, not a physical being. We really need to start living that. If that's what we truly believe, and I truly believe that, we have to start divorcing ourselves from this addiction to one physical form. I am no more this one body than I am a tree outside, but I'm also no less. And if we started to experience life as a shared experience with all other things, whether it's the smallest amoeba, one-celled life form, to the universe itself, all of a sudden we realize that there is no individual ownership taking place to any physical form, that we're all connected to this self, this consciousness, but that isn't that isn't just one specific body that we're taking on. And we've become so attached to this physical form that we don't know how to let go of it. And I think that's where we start to fall into this fear of dying, fear of the unknown.
And that's what's so special about Brighthaven, because, you know, I'm a little bit like Gail. I thought when I started doing Reiki with animals, I was going to have all these healthy animals, maybe like, really super healthy animal sprains their ankle, and then I could go off with some Reiki. And now my teaching center is Brighthaven, which is a hospice, basically. And I'm like, I would have been, 10 years ago, I would have been run screaming from that. That's too hard, it's too sad, I can't do it, oh my God, But what I've learned through experiencing Brighthaven, being there, teaching classes there for the past 10 years, getting to know the animals, sitting with them in meditation, so getting to know their hearts and sharing their journeys towards the end of life and beyond, is that it is not a time for fear. It is not a time of sadness and resistance. The animals teach us that it's a time of surrender, that it's a time of peacefulness, that it's a time to be patient and to be, just simply to be. And there's so much love and joy even in that connection and being. That time is so sacred and beautiful. And I believe that love never dies. So every animal or person that I've ever loved, whether they're here or whether they've transitioned into spirit, they're always in my heart. They're just a part of who I am. And I think that, again, goes back to the nature of, who we are and what is real healing. And real, true healing is about love and compassion, not about just healing bumps and bruises.
I experienced how beautiful the dying process could be with actually Carol Hulse, Marilyn Hillman, who is my fiance and partner for 14 years now, actually introduced me to Brighthaven. But I was with their father the day before he passed, and he wasn't speaking, wasn't eating, and we started playing music he liked, and I was sitting with him, and he was swaying his arms through the air, and he was dancing. He was so peaceful, and occasionally he'd reach out and touch my hand. And it was one of the most beautiful experiences I've ever had, and I'll cherish it for the rest of my life. And he passed away that night, but he literally danced his way to the other side, and I'd never seen or experienced anything so beautiful in my entire life.
Wow, that's beautiful.
I know that you, and I want to make sure we have enough time to talk about this. I know that you and Gail are working on a joint venture together, but before we get into that, I was wondering if you and Gail could both perhaps share a story about how an animal healed you when you're in a moment of crisis or a moment of pain, a moment of doubt, a moment of suffering, that just people would not believe how animals can actually heal us as well.
You want to start, Gail? There's so many. How do you?
I was just going to say, oh my God. Wow. Actually, this kind of story that comes to my mind is kind of more in reverse. I can think of more stories about how animals heal other animals, and the one that comes to mind, which is just a beautiful story. We have a cat here now. He's, we don't focus on ages particularly. You can be young at 80 and you can be old at 17. I think our kind of audience would agree with that. Well, we have a cat here at the moment. His name's Johnny. He's only 14 years of age. However, he's a feline guru, and he's somebody who is a very experienced and wise healer, and he's just filled with love and compassion. And there's one particular story that just really sits deep inside my heart. Johnny is someone who will choose a student, particularly as Kathleen's teaching. He'll choose someone, and he will go to them, and he will snuggle and love and cuddle, and then he'll very gently climb up, and he will lie over their heart. And he does this with very special people who need healing. And on this particular one occasion that touched me beyond measure, we had a lady in class who didn't interact an awful lot. She was a little shy and a little quiet, and she was obviously very, very moved by what Kathleen was saying, and I'm sure you'll understand that having heard her talk. And Johnny chose her, and she asked if it was okay to pick him up, and so I said, yes, carry on, do. And so he laid over her heart, and she sat there, and then finally Johnny got down, and she kind of looked down, and she didn't say anything, but she started to cry. And then she still didn't say anything, and so we very politely gave her some Kleenex, and Kathleen carried on. And it was only later in the day that everyone was kind of sharing experiences and thoughts, and she started to, she actually was sobbing when Johnny was on her, but she started deep, retching, racking sobbing. And when she'd stopped, she just looked up and she said, oh my goodness, my husband died 5 years ago, and I have never cried. And that's the kind of deep, compassionate love that was brought out on just that one occasion. And Johnny's actually done this to so many humans, and you would never know they need help. They're bright and happy, and Johnny lies on them, and the next minute they're crying and sharing something that they needed to let go of, and now they feel healed. And of course, nobody ever knows who he is or what he does before he does it. It's just beautiful, really beautiful. Would that work for a story?
That's a beautiful story, Gail.
Thank you.
Absolutely wonderful.
Well, thank Johnny.
Thank you, Johnny.
And, you know, there's the horses in the field do the same kind of thing. I've seen it many times with students where, you know, often it's an animal that resonates with what's going on inside of the student, even though the person doesn't say anything. But the animals can sense and tell. So I've seen people who are grieving because they've lost someone, and a horse will have died recently before the class, and the horse's, you know, partner, like their best friend who's grieving, will seek out that person who's grieving and put his nose in their chest, and they will sit together, and it's so beautiful. And often the person will cry and have a release, and the horse will go into a very, very deep, like, sleep, almost standing up, like real sleepy or yawning, very deep relaxation. And then afterwards, there's a spring in his step, and he looks happier, and the person feels lighter. So there is an amazing way that animals have of understanding what we're coming from, and often it's because they share that and they know, and we can heal each other through connecting at the heart. And it's so beautiful to see that unfold, to have seen that with so many people at Brighthaven during my Reiki classes over the years. It's just been I'm just humbled to be a witness to it.
I had talked with you a couple days ago, Kathleen, that I take care of the park rangers' horses out at Tam Junction as a volunteer mounted ranger. And one interesting experience I had, because I go out really early, nobody else is out there, just me and the horses. And I had a little bit extra time, so I just wanted to sit and be with them. So I went out in the center of the paddock, and they're giant paddocks out, you know, you're out of cell phone range, everything, almost to the beach. And I sat there, and that didn't faze them. They just went about their business. They were eating their breakfast. And then I laid down. I don't know why, but 3 different paddocks with 3 different horses, they all freaked out. One of them stopped eating, came over and sniffed me. Once he found out I was okay, went back to eat again. I still don't know what it was about, but it was really an interesting experience because it startled them for some reason.
Well, they've probably never seen that before.
That's what my grandmother, who is one of the first female horse trainers, said. She goes, I don't think they probably see a lot of human beings laying down. It was a funny response. So what are you...
Isn't that special to sit and just be with them, though? Because normally when we're with animals, we're doing something. But you can really have some profound realizations when you just sit and be.
You learn so much by watching their interaction. I would... One of the most amazing experiences that I've had since going out there is, you've heard in Marin County, I'm sure you have, Kathleen, about the trouble we were having with wild turkeys. And everyone, oh my gosh, they're so aggressive. Well, I would go out there, and there was probably at one point in time maybe 20 wild turkeys that would be out there, about 6 toms, a bunch of hens. And I would sit in the middle of the driveway as they would all come by, and they'd ruffle their feathers. And it's a really amazing sound if anyone's ever heard tom turkeys trying to give you a warning sound. And these were beautiful turkeys, like they were the peacock of turkeys, but they would all just gather around, literally within touching distance. And one in particular, he would go and eat with the horse, one of the horses, one horse in specific, not the other ones. He would go and eat the grain with the one horse and just hang out the whole time I was there. And I never sensed any aggression from them. They obviously were trying to warn me. But again, if you sit back and you spend time and look at their signs, you not only learn about the animals, but you learn about yourself. And with, say, a turkey, for instance, which we've marginalized to a certain extent, and just like we have most animals, turkeys in Native American culture were actually considered the giveaway eagle because they gave their body away from the tribe, and they were highly honored. And people, one thing I think people would, a great way to start introducing themselves to animal energy and starting to pay attention to animals is actually get yourself some animal medicine cards and really start to study the messages that the Native Americans used to study in the animals and that they shared with us through these cards and the books that they have. And every animal has a specific story to tell. And it's really useful in starting to reconnect with nature that way. And just a suggestion for anyone listening.
It's a lot of fun. And the other thing I would suggest is those of you listening who have a meditation practice, whatever it is, invite your animals to join you. If you have animals that live with you, cats and dogs, if you have a horse, stand out and do your practice in the pasture, or sit out in your yard and invite the squirrels and the birds and whoever else wants to come. Just create that space and invite them all to share. Because when we share the energy of the animals, we receive so many gifts from them because, as you said, they're so close to Mother Nature. They have all this ancient wisdom that we've lost touch with. I believe humans still have that wisdom inside of us, but it's so far buried. But when we connect with animals in that space of quiet, the meditation space, we can access that again. So
absolutely.
So try that too. It's fun. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. So what is it that you and Gail are on working together?
Gail, do you want to start?
No, carry on. You're doing a wonderful job. Keep going.
Okay.
Gail's thrilled that she hasn't put her foot in her mouth yet. She was concerned before we came on.
All right. No, I shall pick up the flag. Basically, what we want to do is to bring the world of Brighthaven and the world of Reiki together to form a unique partnership and just try to bring about a paradigm shift in the way that we all care for animals. We want to create this wonderful organization where people can come and learn and love and just spread the word through the world. It's just so different. Kathleen, I'm sure you'll express it a lot better than me, but that's kind of it in a nutshell. There's an awful lot more, of course.
We've called it Anshin, which is a Japanese word for peaceful mind, peaceful heart. And we see it as basically what we're doing right now, whereas, at Brighthaven, where we have people come and learn from the animals and learn meditation and learn how to connect from the heart, and then go home and take all those lessons in heart opening and compassion with them into their world. But we want to go bigger, so we want it to be like a retreat center. So it's going to be, we visualize it as a retreat center where people come, but you know what's missing? There's a lot of cool retreat centers out there. I agree that there is, but where are the animals? there's a lot of cool meditation centers. Where are the animals? We want to bring that piece to spiritual healing, love, compassion, wellness, harmony of body, mind, and spirit. Let's bring the animals in. So this is a place where you go and you stay and you learn to be within yourself and spirit, and the animals, the resident animals that live there, the senior special needs hospice animals that live there, will be there to help guide you. And there is no other place like this in all the world. This is a brand new, to me it's like, this is the way the world should be. We're created in this little space, Anshin. People come and stay, change their spirit, their heart, their life, get inspired, go home and bring all of that love and beautifulness back to their world. So that is a little bit more about it.
And where are you at in the process of putting this together?
Well, we're just about done with our business plan. And then phase 2, we've actually found a property that looks pretty good, that looks pretty interesting in Northern California, that we think would work really well. So our next phase is going to be seeking funding. And we're looking for like an angel investor to help support this project, somebody who wants to change the paradigm between humans and animals. Because Gail and I, what we've seen, when people learn meditation and learn spiritual healing, but they do it with the animals, they are so changed and so inspired and so healed. It's hard to even describe. But we always look at each other and we're like, we have to be doing this on a grander scale. We've got to get the word out because it's so incredible and so beautiful. So we need to find somebody that can help fund this, who really understands the importance of meditation and spiritual peace and harmony, but also understands that animals are not just lowly beings. They're actually our spiritual partners on this planet, and they have a lot to teach us.
You know, well, that's something that is really important, I think, for us to stop and think about for a moment, because it's so easy to look at all of the negativity in the world and some of the same patterns repeating themselves now. But especially when it comes to animals, boy, do I know, growing up on a farm in Washington, the thinking about animals was so vastly different then as it is today. The understanding of, well, animals didn't have feelings, they didn't dream, they didn't see color. That we should make note of. Hello?
I lost you, but you're back. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. What did you hear me say or not say?
I just heard the very beginning of what you started to say.
What I was saying is that our attitudes and understandings of animals has changed so greatly in my lifetime. Growing up on a farm, yeah, you were told animals didn't feel, they didn't think, dogs didn't see color, animals didn't really taste. It didn't matter what you fed them. All of that's changed, and in fact, I just this past week they'd done a study. Of course, we have to study this before we can just accept anything. Is that animals actually experience jealousy and stuff? That they will get jealous of another animal getting attention. They'll want to, not in a bad way, but they definitely show signs of wanting to get that extra affection, or wanting to get that extra food, and it can be another animal, it can be another person. So our attitudes, as they've shifted towards our understanding and relationship towards animals, I think that's a positive thing for us to take note of as far as our growth as a collective. That shift that we've had as far as our relationship and understanding to how we relate and how animals relate to us and how animals experience this existence as well.
Yeah, and we kind of see, Gail and I really see Anshin as really continuing that at a really high level, where people come and stay and are changed, and they go back to their lives and they are never the same. I mean, they understand the oneness and beauty of this shared spirit and journey, and there's just so much love that it stays with them, and so that's, really a big part of it. Right, Gail? Anything else? Did I cover it?
And it really is. It's all about love.
And Gail, I know that all charities and charitable organizations like Brighthaven. Before I get into this, where did the name Brighthaven come from?
Well, actually, it appeared one night. Richard and I were in bed, and there were several, probably quite a few cats on the bed, but one of them was an old lady. She was 28 years old, and her name was Jaja. And she was just lying, curled up kind of in between our legs, and the sun was coming up, and it shafted across the bed. And Richard said, "Oh my goodness, that's what we need to call it, Brighthaven." So that's the story of Brighthaven. That's how it all began.
That is, I imagined that the story was beautiful. That's more beautiful than I imagined it. Now, as I was saying, a lot of charitable organizations have really struggled since the economy tanked back in 2008. And I know Brighthaven's struggled the same. So how can we get involved to help Brighthaven? How can people who want to donate, volunteer, how would they reach out to you to be able to do that?
Oh, the easiest way would be to visit our website. You could call us, you can email us. Shall I go ahead and give some contact information, Kit?
Might as well.
Well, our website is brighthaven.org. Our business telephone number is area code 707-578-4800. Our email address is info@brighthaven.org. And we would just love to hear from everybody. The work we do is so special, or the animals are so special. And I should say we are a non-profit, and obviously we're a starving non-profit. Times are hard. But for the last 10 years, this wonderful lady that you've been listening to tonight has donated 50% of all her teaching, her students' class fees, to Brighthaven. So she's a major support to the work that we do. And Anshin is so deeply ingrained in our hearts now. We have to make this a success, because it's important not only for animals. The work we do is rescue. The animals that come here come from shelters. They've been discarded, they've been abandoned. They all have stories and sadnesses to bring with them, but there are so many more that we can't help, and with the right funding we can open our doors to many more, and we can get Anshin off the ground. And just look at the number of people we can help. So
and Kathleen, how can people reach out to you?
You can visit my website at animalreikisource.com, and Reiki is spelled REIKI. And my email is info@animalreikisource.com. And you can also follow me on Facebook. Animal Reiki Source is my Facebook page.
Fantastic. Well, I truly am honored and appreciative that you guys took the time to be with me tonight on the Just Love Show. If you guys could stick around for a second, we're going to play out with Bob Marley, One Love, which was Gail's selection for music tonight. I'd also like to remind everyone, if you have a favorite song you'd like to have played on the show, or just want to reach out and comment, reach out to me about your thoughts on the show, you can reach me at justlovemovementradio@gmail.com. Again, justlovemovementradio@gmail.com, or you can visit the website, justlovemovement.com, or you can find me on Facebook at Just Love. Again, thank you so much, Gail and Kathleen, for taking your time out of your night and spending it with us and sharing your just amazing stories with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me.
And thank you from me too. It's been wonderful.
Just love to you both.